Okay, so hi again. Welcome to today's class. Today's class 17, week 9. And today we'll begin our journey into the backend. So just to go over some of the things we'll be covering today. Today we'll start with an introduction to the backend. We'll talk about what the backend is. We'll talk about servers. We'll talk about what servers are. Then we'll talk about Node and Express. So we have a few things to get into. As always, if you have any questions from our last meeting or anything, please feel free to ask. So do you have any questions?
No, not from our last meeting, but you said Node and something else.
Node and Express. We'll talk more about it. So Node
Oh,
and
okay.
Node and Express. Yeah, we'll talk more about what it what
Okay.
it is when we get there. Okay,
Okay.
cool. So let's talk about the backend. So most times you hear people say front end, back end, and what is it? So most for our time together, most of the things we've been doing is the front end. So we've always said that the front end is the part where the user can directly interact with. So the front end represents the part of our application or the web where the user interacts with. And usually what we typically use is HTML, CSS, and JavaScript that is running in the browser. So most of our code we've written so far is all on the front end, is what our users can directly see. Now, the backend on the other side is what is going on behind the scenes. So it is the part of your application where the user is not directly interacting with. So the backend is the code that runs on the server. It receives requests from the client, and then it contains some logic to send the appropriate data that they are requesting back to the client. So the main difference is that the front end is what you directly see and interact with, and the backend is what is going on behind the scenes that the user does not directly interact with, but it has some effect on whatever is going on the front end. So today we'll talk mostly about the backend because currently we know the front end. So when we build HTML, CSS, JavaScript applications, and we're running it in the browser, that is our front end stuff. So today we'll start talking about the backend. Okay. So the backend typically includes, so typically you have a server, typically you have an application which is running on the server that listens for request. So when there's a request, it will retrieve some information to satisfy that request, and it will send it back to the client. And then you have a database. So a database is where you're storing all your information and all the data. So typically your backend, you break your backend architecture into these three parts. So you have the server, you have the application, and you have a database. Any questions so far?
No.
Okay, cool. Uh, okay, cool. So what we want to talk about is before we start writing backend code or going deeply into the backend, we want to talk about Node.js. We spoke briefly about Node.js the last time. I don't know if you remember anything we said about Node the other time.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
what do you remember? As always, no pressure, but do you remember anything?
Well, I don't remember the specifics. But I remember it's wait. Please, I'm sorry, continue.
No, no problem, no problem.
I
That's
have to
fine.
leave this place.
Oh, okay. Okay,
Okay.
cool. Yeah, so when we were talking about, we said normally we run our code in an environment. So most times we run it in the browser. So we run like our client stuff in the browser. So the front end stuff, we've been running it in the browser. But then for us to be able to do backend code, we need a kind of environment that allows us to do a similar thing as we were doing in the browser. So we said Node.js is is it's a runtime. We said Node.js is a runtime that allows us to do the same thing we're doing on the browser, but to be able to do that on our computers or to be able to do that for the server. So Node.js is a popular JavaScript runtime that is used for backend development. It allows you to run JavaScript code on the server side. So if we want to run JavaScript code on the client side, we normally use the browser. But if we want to run JavaScript code on the server side, we usually use the runtime environments. And I guess the most popular one is Node.js. So Node.js is just an environment for running JavaScript on the server side, whereas the browser is a JavaScript environment for running code on the client side, or yeah, on the client side. So that's like the main difference. And I guess when we're talking about it, we said usually what our server needs is our server needs access to disk. So our server needs some kind of hard drive or SSD, and it also needs like network access. So it needs like internet, it needs something to allow it to process requests and responses. So that is what Node.js allows us to do. So in very simple terms, the thing that allows us to run our JavaScript in the browser is the same thing that's Node is using to allow us to run our JavaScript outside of the browser, but on the server side. So yeah, I hope that makes sense. The last time we went over installing Node, so I believe we already have Node installed, right? So we don't have to
Yeah.
go. Yeah, but I mean, I put the link here regardless. I always share the slide. So if anybody wants to
Mm.
install Node, you can just go to the website and you just follow the instructions and install it. So the thing about Node is Node has a lot of things built in. So you have like models, and the more we're going to explain what all these things are, but you have like models, you have like HTTP, which allows you to like access the network. So it allows for network access. You have what we call the file system, which allows you to read things of your computer and things like that. So all these things are built into Node. So it makes it easy for us to be able to, I guess, build build out servers locally. And Node comes to what we call NPM. So NPM is a package management system where we can install things. So when people build packages for Node, there's this ecosystem which is called like NPM. So you can not only the inbuilt thing that comes with Node, but if you want to add extra features, if you see any extra feature you want to add, you can just Node also allows you to install external things to build your applications. So I guess we'll talk more about this as we go on. Okay, cool. If you have any questions at any point, please let me know. So
So yeah,
now
please go over the N. Please go
NPM,
over the. You said N.
NPM.
And
So
yeah, what does it mean?
so it's a Node package manager. So Node package manager. So by default, you have Node. Node comes with inbuilt things. So for example, think about your iPhone. When you have your iPhone, you have like applications that comes already on your iPhone. But then if you want to install more things, you can go to the App Store and you can install things. So the
Mm.
NPM is sort of like the App Store where you can go there and install things, additional things you
Okay.
want for your node. So NPM node package manager. So it's for managing node packages.
Okay.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So now we can start talking about a server. We always hear a server, a server, a server. I mean, without reading what I put here, usually when you hear server, what comes to mind?
A big machine
Mm-hmm.
in a cold room to
Mm-hmm.
where like data and stuff are stored
Mm-hmm.
for like big companies. I mean, that's what I know.
Yeah, that's true. Because I mean, companies have server rooms and things like that.
Yeah.
So by default, what a server is a server is simply a computer that is listening for like incoming requests. So it's listening for some kind of request that is incoming, and then the server is like processing those requests and like generating some sort of response. So that is a server. So when we talk about a server, by default, that is what a server is. So I found this definition from Code Academy. I thought it was like a good definition. So a server is simply a computer that listens for incoming requests. Though they are machines made and optimized for this particular purpose, any computer that is connected to a network can act as a server. So in our time together, most times we'll transform our computers into servers that will be listening for request and response, because then we don't have like a big cloud and stuff like that. But usually you have like something in the cloud. These days you have like servers in the cloud like AWS, Amazon Web Service and stuff like that, which are in the cloud. And yeah, I mean, not literally in the cloud, but like in the cloud. A cloud is like somebody else's machine, like somebody else's computer, which is like listening
Yeah.
for.
So like
Uh,
Google Cloud
yeah,
also.
I to be honest, I have to check. I don't know if Google has I'm not sure, to be honest. They probably do. They probably do. But I guess right now the biggest is AWS, Amazon Web Service,
Oh,
which
okay.
is like a lot of companies like host their servers on Amazon. So these days, rather than you building your own server room, where like like in the olden days, these days they're like computers in the cloud that you can buy. So like you can
Yeah,
buy a part of like Amazon Web Service and use it to host your service without having to build your own server room and
yeah,
everything. So by default, what's the basic thing that the server is doing is that it is listening for incoming requests. So the incoming request comes, it processes it. There's usually some logic on the server that is processing these requests and then it's sending some response back. So like we said, when we talk about backend, it's usually these three things. It's usually a server. It is usually an application that is running on the server and listening for these requests and response. And and then you have the database. So the database is where you are storing and retrieving like all your data from. I guess when we go on, that you're familiar with SQL, there's MongoDB, stuff like that. So there are different like databases that you can use. But by default, when we talk about backend, it's usually these three things. Okay. So I guess now that we understand what a server is, we can start by, I guess, building out a server and maybe talking about what it is doing and things like that. So when we spoke about Node, we said Node allows us to build servers. So we said Node allows us to build code that is running on the backend. So which means Node can allow us to build servers that we can then use to process these requests and responses. We'll use MongoDB for our database when we eventually get there. But I mean, as you progress, I guess for like very big projects or like big companies, they'll use something like maybe SQL, Postgres, and things like that. But for our little things we'll be building here, MongoDB is more than good enough. Plus, big companies even use MongoDB. But the first part is the server. So I'll open up my VS Code. Then we can start diving into how the server will actually look like and what building the server would look like. So let me okay, so I'll just open up my VS Code here, git bash code. By the way, are you able to connect your screen now or not yet?
Not yet. Maybe in just about 5 minutes.
Okay,
So
no
I'll
problem.
let you know when I connect. Yeah,
Okay,
thanks.
no problem. Okay, so I'll push this thing here. Okay, cool. So I have an empty folder. So usually the way we begin initializing our servers, when we want to build out a service and we want to use Node is, Node comes with a command that allows us to sort of initialize a new application. So the way we do that is we use the keyword. I mean, you could probably guess what the keyword is, but when we do npm init, so npm is the package manager for Node. So anytime we want to do things, install things, start things, we'll most likely be using npm. So since we already have Node, and if you want to check if you have Node installed in your terminal, you can type node-v. So it says I have the version 18.13. So it means I have Node. So if you didn't have Node, if you check for the version, it would probably tell you that you don't have Node. So the way you check if you have Node installed is to just use the command node-v. So now that I have Node installed, I know that I can use the npm package to do stuff. So usually when you want to start the backend project, you have to initialize it. So the way you initialize it is with the keyword npm. npm is the Node package manager init. So npm init will start up your project. So when you do npm init, it will just ask you to fill a few things. So first of all, it's asking me what is the name of my project. So I could maybe call it backend project. These things, I mean, you can skip all these things. So enter, you don't have to give it a description. Entry point is how you'll be entering into your server. So what will be the name of the file that you want to enter your backend with? So here it's by default it's index.js. But if you wanted to, if you'd like to name your projects, your entry file into the project something else, you could always change the name. But I guess we'll just keep index.js and we can skip all these things. We don't have a Git repository, we don't have a keyword. We don't have, I mean, I'm the author, but I don't want to do these things. So is this okay? So this is just me running the default. I mean, if you want to skip all these things, when you do npm init, you can just add the -y and it will just like fill it out, auto fill it out. Because then what happens is that after you create it, what it happens is that it creates a package.json. So a package.json is a file that manages all the things you are installing when you start an npm project. Give me a second, please. A package.json file is just a file where all the things we install, and it's essentially the ID for our project. So all the things we install, things like that, we'll see it in our package.json. So anytime we initialize a project, it will create a package.json for us. Anytime we install stuff, it will be added to the package.json. So it's essentially the ID for our project where we can come and see like everything about our project, all the things we have installed and things like that. So like you can see, it has the name backend project because I gave it the backend. It has the version, all these things. So if usually when you're doing it, you can just do npm init-y or just autofill it everything. And if you want to manually change stuff, you can come into your package.json and change it and everything. Does this make sense so far? Hi, can you hear me?
Oh, sorry. I was saying not really. It's not so clear.
Okay. Would you like me to go over?
Yeah, please.
Okay, cool. So the first thing is, let me delete my package.json file so that we can go over it again. Move to recycle bin. Okay, so I'll just clear this terminal. Okay, cool. So we just begin everything again. So first, what we are doing is we're trying to build out a backend. So we're going to build out a backend. So we're going to build out a server. And we said we already have Node installed. So we're going to use Node to build our backend. What Node allows us to do is it allows us to run JavaScript code for the server side. So this is not code that we are directly running in the browser, but it's code that we're running on the server side. So we want to build out a server. And the way we want to build out a server is before we can do that, before we can implement our server, first we have to initialize our application. So we have to sort of create a template for our application. So we are creating a template for our application. And the way we do that is we use npm init, which means we are initializing our project. So this is the initialize command. What this will do is that it will generate a package.json at the root of the project, which will contain all the information about the project. So when we do this, we are initializing the project and it will create a package.json, which will contain like all the information about our project. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I mean, just so usually when you do it, it'll ask you to fill in some things, but I want to skip all that. So I just add .ts, which just means yes. So just say yes for everything. So
Mm,
okay, so it auto completed for me. But if you wanted to, I mean, after, can you see it generated a package.json?
yeah.
So the JSON file is just like the ID for our project. So this will contain like all the information about the project we are starting. So every time when we're starting
Okay.
like the backend or the server, we initialize the project with npm init. Then from there we can start doing stuff. So it just called the name of my folder. But if you wanted to manually change the name of your project, maybe call it backend, class backend,
Mm,
you could manually just change it to class backend. If you wanted to add a description, what the project is about, you can add it and things like that. So, so far, does this part make sense?
yeah.
Okay.
On mine, I see some M on the side of the package.json. I don't know what it is.
You see an M.
Yeah, like on that side, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I think you initialized it in. one of the, I think you initialized it in a folder that you had pushed to GitHub, I think.
Ah, yeah.
Yeah, so it's just like it's just
Yeah.
assuming that you haven't processed changes, so it's going to keep track of those things. So it's nothing.
Uh,
Yeah.
so then, like, if how I'm just because from the last, I think from the last time
Hmm.
that it was still, yeah, it's in the class 16 material. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I get it. So if I don't want to push it to um Git, then let me see. I'm just
Yeah.
thinking what to do.
So I mean, most times, I guess when you're writing Go, you actually push it. So for example, if you see this, if you go into your package.json, you see one line that says get repository, and it already is filled out, right?
Just a minute. Actually, no.
Okay,
I
so
see.
let,
I can just send you a screenshot. You
no, don't worry.
see on what?
Let me just open. Okay, okay, you can just send me a screenshot. That's fine.
Okay. Wait. Um, Sent.
Okay, cool. Let me take a look at it. Okay. Yeah, so it's just saying, so if you put your Keza on the U that is next to the package.json, it'll just be untracked.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it means you already have like a Git folder initialized. So it's on track because you've not
Um,
added it to your Git repository. So it means if you push the code to GitHub, it won't contain like these changes. So it's nothing. It's just because you've
oh,
done it in a folder where you've initialized like a Git repository. So it wants to keep track of like all your changes that you
okay.
make. Yeah. So it's nothing.
Oh, okay. But if I didn't want to, then I go to file and then I say new file or new window
If can
and
you
then I
repeat that?
start.
If you didn't want to push that code to GitHub,
Like, yes.
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 So I mean, if you don't want to push, if you click on source control, it has probably changed. So if you click on it, it'll have like the number of things, the number of changes you've made. Then you can just undo everything. But I guess the question you're asking is, if you want, you can just create a new folder and like start a project in it. Even though this is not an issue, like except it's making you
Yeah.
uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Yeah, but this is not an issue. Yeah.
Oh no. Okay. Okay. All right. No, I just want to know for future also.
Yeah. So usually when you initially when you push your code to GitHub, I mean, you still have the file on your thing. So usually whenever you're making changes, first of all, you do what we call git pull. You pull from GitHub just in case anybody else has added anything. But when you start making changes,
Mm.
it will change the color just to tell you that, or you've started making new changes, you're not keeping track of it. Or so just to like remind you that when you're
Okay.
pushing, so it's just like a normal thing to get used. So you means that
Mm.
it's on track, so you've not added it to your Git your Git folder, the one you do the Git in it. So what you want to do is after you are done, all the ones that has the you want to do like git add and add them to your Git file. Then afterwards you can like commit them.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So yeah. So now just to go over, I guess just to go over a few of the things. We see the name of our application, whatever we want to call it. And we see the version of Node that we are using. We see a description. So description usually can write maybe what the project is about. And we see the main. So the main will be the entry point of our application. So if we want to enter the application, we are saying that whatever file we want to enter the application with, we'll call it index.js. So it means that we'll create a file called index.js, and that's how we'll enter our application. So if you want to enter application, we'll write the code in a file called index.js. So that'll be how we will enter application. If we want to use a different file, all you have to do is just change the main and name it whatever you want to name it, which will be like how you enter the application. It will be the entry point for your application. Now, this test is just to test out your code, but usually you won't do any test. So we'll come back to it. We'll talk about how to start your server. And these are just like keywords that you want to add. So maybe you want to do like node, just keywords about the project. And this is just like author. So any questions about like that part?
What do you mean by enter the application?
So when we build out the server, there has to be a way that we're able to access the server. So how are we going to access the server? So we're going to access the server by like a script called index.js. So that would be where all the code about our backend will be. So we have to, because when we're running the server, we have to tell it that we're running the server using this particular file. So all the file to run all the code to run the backend will be in a file called this.this. So right now we're just telling it that in index.js, that would be like where the code for our server will be. That's where the main part of our backend will be. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. If anything doesn't make sense, please feel free to tell me.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So so now we have the entry point is index.js. So just let me just console log something, console.log hello. Hello. So now I'm console logging hello. So the way I can run my application is by in the script file, I have to write a command for running the server. And don't worry, it just seems like it's a lot, but don't worry, it's you get used to it. So in the script, I have to write the command for like starting my application. So I can just change the test. Since I don't need a test, I can change it to start. And the way I'm going to start my application is by using Node, because I'm using Node for the backend. So Node and the name and the main entry point of my application, so which is index.js. So whenever I start my application, whenever I run the script file, it's going to use Node to start this index, because we said that's where the main part of our code will be. So anytime we run an application, we want to run this index.js. So all I've done is that I've added a start script and I've just added Node. So since I'm going to be using Node to run my backend and just the name of my my entry point. So
then the start. Can you explain this like start part again?
So this is a script. So the script. Okay, what are they saying? So the script is usually the different commands I want to run, especially for this application. So for example, if I want to start it, how am I going to start it? I can add a script. So I'm saying that this one can be anything. I mean, I can call it run. So I'm just saying that the way I want to run my application is by using Node. I want to use Node to start this file, which is called index.js. So I usually call it start just so that you know that that's how you want to start your application. So it's just a script, and this is just the name. This is just the name. So this is just the name, and this is the command. So the command is for Node to run this file. So you can call it anything. So by default, what it means is that when I do like npm start, it'll run this command. So it will do node index.js. It's almost the same as me doing this one, node index.js. If I do node index.js, what it will do is that you can see that it has run the command hello, because you see I put console log hello. So it has just run, it has just run the command. So what I'm just doing is that I'm sort of, it's like object, so a key and value. So I'm saying that this key, the value is this. So anytime I do npm start, what I want you to do is I want you to run this command, and this command is just to start my server. So instead of every time typing node index.js, I could just make a script where I give it a key, and this will be the value. So when I do npm start, sorry, I haven't saved it. So when I do npm start, you can see that it just does the same thing. It just console logs hello. So it's the same thing as me just manually writing this every time, or me just making a script and giving a key. I'm saying that this is the key, this will be the value. So every time I do npm start or run whatever I have on the right side. Any questions?
No.
Okay, cool. So I mean, this is the setting up. Does it make sense, or for anything you want me to go over?
No.
Okay, cool. So what we do is when we are coming to start the backend, or when we want to start a node server, what we want to do is first we want to initialize it. So we do npm init. It fills out this thing. Then just so that when we are starting our application, it can be easy for us, we can add a start script, and then we can do node index.js. I mean, we'll learn more scripts as we go on. So yeah. So right now I don't have anything in I just have console.log. So when I want to start my application, if I do npm start, it'll just like console.log it. So you can see that it has just console.logged this. Okay. Okay. So now we can, I guess, begin writing our server. Okay, cool. So by default, there are ways we can write it with Node. So we'll just look at how to write it with Node. Then we'll look at how we can do the same thing easily with Express. So because we are building a server, the first thing we usually need is that we need some kind of server model. So if we want to build a server, what we need is we need to import some web servers or some models that can allow us to build a server. And thankfully, Node has a model for building a server. So it's called HTTP. So what we can do is we can maybe define it const HTTP. So this is just me setting a variable, and I can do what we call require HTTP. So all this is saying is that I'm requiring. So when you require something, it means that it's already built in. So it's like the way if you already have an application on your phone, you don't have to install it. All you have to do is find it and open it. Whenever you use a require keyword, it means that either you already have it installed or you've already installed it, like it comes inbuilt or you've installed it. So now you're asking that I want to use it, so you can require it. There's another way you can write it like this. You can import it. So you can import HTTP from, I guess then the module is called HTTP. So this is just like the variable name. So you can call it anything. So you can call it like request, but just so that it's easy, usually you always call it like HTTP. So you are requiring this HTTP, you are requiring this method, and you're just storing it in a variable. So you are requiring this. The HTTP interface in Node.js are designed to support many features of the protocol, which have been traditionally difficult to use, plenty things. So this is just what you call a server model that we will need if we want to create a server. So usually you see if you go on a website, you see that it is HTTP or HTTPS. So it's by default a way of sending requests and receiving requests. So if you want to build out a server, this is one of the things you need to be able to build out a server. And when we get to Express, it's a little easier to do with Express. But I mean, if you understand how to do with Node, then it will make sense when you start using Express. So the first thing we do is we require this model, and okay, so after we require this model, what we can then do is that we can start creating our server. So what we can do is we can let's define a variable called application. So let's call it app. So all these things are just like defining variables. So we can set our app to. So now we can use this model that we've required. We can do HTTP dot, and then we can create the server. So there's a model called create server. And then when we create the server, and I guess when I'm done, I'll just like go over it. So we have the request, we have the response, and then what we want to do with it. Okay, so what we are doing is that we've required this. Now we've set it into a variable so we can use it. So this is a server model. So when we require the server model, there's a method that comes with the server model, which is create server, which allows us to create a server. And the server allows us to send request and receive response. So we are taking the create server method that comes with this HTTP, and we're just using it to create our server. Does that make the kind of, is there anything confusing about what we've written? I mean, I know it's confusing, but where is it confusing?
Mm. So I get the command so far.
Okay, cool. So now we are saying that there'll be a request. So in our server, there'll be a request and there'll be a response. So now we just have to do, just have to write what we want to do when there's a request. So by default, most requests are get, and I guess we'll get there. So we're just saying that if the request comes on our server, what do we want to do? So I guess right now we can just like maybe console log, something like that. But the thing about, I guess, Node is that you actually have to set what kind of response it will be like. So remember the last time when we're doing the API thing, we spoke about how there are different kinds of like responses that come with the header. So like you have 200, which means everything was okay. And by the way, let me just like console log the HTTP so that we see what it actually is. So if I run my server again, npm start. So so you can see that by default, these are all the things that are contained in this HTTP that I've required. So it's an inbuilt model that has like so many things that we can use. So you can see it comes with like different methods. We'll talk about methods. It comes with like different status codes. So we're talking about status codes. We said 200 means that your request was okay. 400 means that your request failed. So all these things are just like built into it. So when I console log, you see all these things come with it. So by default, what we can then do is that we can say that if our response is okay, then we want to do something. So if we do response, and don't worry, just this is like like the gruesome way of doing it. Don't worry, it'll become easier. So if our response is okay, so if our response is okay, so okay is 200. If our response is okay, and our response is the content type of our response. So if you see here, in the headers, there's usually a content type. So if we say our content type is what we are receiving. So is it text? Is it numbers? Is it all those things? So don't, when I'm done typing, I'll go over again. So content type. And but don't worry, these things I couldn't type them off head initially. So it's totally normal if like you can, like it takes a while to even figure out what all these things are doing. So you don't have to in the beginning type them off head. I'll send this to you. You can just look on it. Oh, okay. Sorry. Okay. So if our content type is if our status is 200 and the content that is coming is text or is just plain, then we'll do something with that request. So I mean for now we can just send something. So we can just do like response dot end, and we can just do hello. We can just do hello world. And okay, so just to go over this, so we're using the HTTP method to create a server. So when we create a server, we will listen for a request and response. And this thing is just an arrow function. So let me just copy. This is, if you remember when we briefly spoke about arrow functions, this thing is an arrow function. So this is an arrow function. So you could also write the same thing as function, function app and you could pass in like request, response, and then you could do the same thing we've done inside. You could do the same thing. So it's just an arrow function, which is the same thing. But most times when you're doing like request methods and stuff like that, I guess it's cleaner and easier to just use an arrow function than to write a function. Because if I do this, now I have to, it's just more cumbersome to like do it manually. So I just wanted to show you that the thing that we have in the bracket is just like a regular function. It's nothing that we haven't seen before. So okay. So just to go over. So all we are doing is we're requiring the HTTP method. If we want to create a server, we first have to require the HTTP method. When we require, we have to require the HTTP model. After we've required the HTTP model comes with a method called create server, which allows us to create a server. And then when we create the server, we can use that to write out what we want to do when we receive a request and a response. So here we are saying that when we receive a request, what we want to do is that we want to check if the request is okay and the content type is text or plain. If it is, then what we want to do is we want to end the response by saying hello world. So we want to send back hello world. So when we receive the request and everything is okay, we want to send back a response that will say hello world. So just to show you how this will work, what we can do is we can define a port. A port is where the application will run. So let's just do a port 3000, and we can be like our app should listen. So the port is where we'll be listening for the request. So we have to tell it where we want to listen for the request. So we just want to do app.listen and our port. I tired.
No, it's not me. But I am also tired, but that wasn't me.
Okay, cool. So I'll go over all this again, so don't worry. And I mean, I'll show you how to do it express. So all we are doing is that we're creating the server. On this line, we're creating the server. On this line, we're checking if the request is, if it's 200, it means it's okay. So when you're using Node, you have to like manually check if the request is okay. So if the request is okay and the type of request you're receiving is text, because we want to check if it's text. If it's text and it is okay, it is 200, then what we want to do is that we want to send back hello world. And then where we are listening for this request, so we have to like specify where we want to listen for this request. So we say we want to listen for this request on a port called 3000. So our server will be running on a port called 3000 because we want to use our computer as a server. So we're going to run our thing on port called 3000. And then if the server is running, so here we are just listening. App.listen means that we are listening for our server. So if our server is running, we'll just console log it. So let me just run this, see if it works. Then we'll look at how to do it in Express. Hopefully it'll make it a bit easier. So by the way, how will I run my server?
What did you say?
I was like, how will I run my server?
N NPM.
Mm-hmm. NPM.
No,
What keyword did we use when we wrote our script?
no, not the dash V, right? That one is just showing the first start. Yeah. Oh. Um, dash M.
No,
Oh, this is. Oh, okay.
yeah, start. So now it says our server is running
Start.
on port 3001. Let's just see if our server is actually running, and then we can go over it again. So if I go to so the way if I'm running the server on my computer, I can run it on what we call a local host. So like I'm hosting it locally. So if I go to localhost and then the port I give it, so I gave it 3000. I guess was it 3000? No, 3001. On 3001.
2001.
So you can see that on 3001, we get the request back, hello world. If we go into our network tab and if we go into our network tab and we check for our request, oh, by the way, let me just go over this again before we go into the network tab. So, do you want to talk me through it so that I know where you don't understand, so that I know where to explain? Do you want to talk me through what this is doing? Like what this, so this is like a simple server. So what the server is doing? No pressure, as always.
You said the HTTP dot create server is creating the server. And then response dot write head. Let's go 200 is I don't remember what that one is doing.
Okay, so the right head is just checking for there is the request that we receive is checking the status of the request. So it's checking. That's why we are manually checking if it's 200, because we know that if it's 200, it means that it's okay. And we're also checking what type of, yeah, I mean, usually if you Google like status, HTTP status code, you see all the different ones. I mean, I just like, I don't know all of it. I know 200 is okay. I know like 404 is error. So usually if you go on a website and it's an error, it'll be like 404. So all those things are like just request and like the response. So if it is a bad request, like it didn't go through, it means that you weren't able to successfully connect to the server. So then we'll be like, oh, this is an error. So then usually you write code on the backend that if this is an error, say this or say that bad request or something like that. So all those things are going on in the server. So we're saying this first line is just us requiring the inbuilt HTTP method, which HTTP model, which we are going to use to create our server. Now on this line, we say that in our HTTP model, it comes with a method called create server, which allows us to create a new web server. So if we want to create a web server, we just require the HTTP model and we use the create server method that comes with it. And the create server, since it's a method, it means we can pass in like callbacks. So all we are doing is that in the create method, we are passing in the request and the response. So first we want to check for, if we get a request, we want to check if the status is okay. So if it's 200 and if the content type is text, then if everything is okay, what we want to do is that we want to send hello world. I mean, for example, if somebody was logging in, we could check if everything is okay, then we could maybe send them to like a page. So usually when you go on a website, if you're not logged in, like some website, you can't like see another part. So that would be like one way of checking. So you check if they've logged in, then the rest.send will send them to like maybe the profile page or something like that. So this is like the way you would check. So all those things to check if you are logged in and things like that will be going on the back end. But let me just quickly show you how this will be to do with Express. Then we'll take a break. So I know and your eyes are like, what is this plenty thing? Yeah, I'm thinking the same thing. Yeah, it's just good to know like how to do with Node, because then most times you probably just do Express, but you have to know what is going on. So now, what is Express? Express is just a Node framework. It allows us to do some of the things easily. So there are several libraries that people write where, I mean, you could build out a whole application just using like raw Node. So Node writes out the raw things, but there are people who build on top of Node where they make some of the things easy. So you say that they've abstracted it, so you don't have to like do the groundwork. So they just build a foundation for you so that you can start building without having to lay the foundation yourself. So one of these libraries is called Express. So Express just abstracts some of the things. So creating a server and things like that, it just abstracts it so that you don't have to manually check for the request. You don't have to manually check for like if it is 200 and things like that. So we'll just quickly look at how we can do this with Express, then we'll take a break. So because Express is a framework, to be able to use it, it's not inbuilt into Node. So it's it is an additional thing. So if we want to use Express, what we can do is we can do npm install, then we can install Express. So if we do npm install Express, we want to install an additional thing since it's not like inbuilt. So we'll install Express, and it's installing. Let me pull up the timer whilst this is installed. Okay, so it has installed Express. Now the way I can check if it has installed Express, if I go back into my package.json, I can see that now I have a dependency, which is Express. So it means I've installed a dependency. So a dependency is like something that your project is dependent on. So it's not something that you had, it's something that you've added. So now you can see that I've added Express. So now I can go ahead and use Express. Now the first thing, I'll just comment this out and we'll do the same thing, but we see that it will be a lot more simpler. So the first thing you do is, since I've installed Express, I have to, if I want to use it in my application, I have to require it. So I can just do like const. I have to require Express, const Express, and I'm just using the same one, so it's easier. So I require Express. So this is me just requiring Express. Now, after I've required Express, what I can do is that I can create the server the same way I was creating it in. By the way, are you like following along? Should I take my
Yeah,
time?
yeah, yeah.
Okay, cool.
Following.
Okay, cool. Have you been able to install Express?
Just just okay.
No pressure. Don't worry, we just afterwards I'll just type it. We'll go for the break, and when we can we'll walk through
Yeah.
it. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, so now when I require Express, so Express is just going to allow me to do the same Node thing. So Express is just built on top of Node and it's abstracting like most of the things. So when I require Express, what I can do is that I can set my application to Express. So when I call, we said that usually when we want to run a function, we just add parentheses to it. So what I can do is that, just so that it's easy, let me just set Express into so let me just set it into a variable called application, and let me just run it. I'm calling up. So now all I can do is that instead of listening for like server checking all the things, what I can do is that I can just do app.get. So I'm saying if my request method is get, and we'll talk more about what get is. If my request method is get and is from the home route, all I want to do is I want to pass in these things. So check for, and then when we come back, we'll talk about it line by line. So I want to check for my request. Then I want to check for my response. Then all I want to do now is that I want to, Express will check if everything is okay. I don't have to manually check. So I can just do rest.send. So I call the response.send. Hello world. So this should be a string. And apparently I can't spell world. So all these things we had in Node is what has been simplified here to one line. So now all we can do is just the same thing. We have to specify where we want our app to run. So we can just run our app on a port called, you can make your port anything. So let's just run it on, I guess. And let's just run it on 2000. Then we want our app to listen. So we want our app to listen. So the reason we want our app to listen is we want our app to listen if there's any request. So if there's any request, then you do this thing. So it'll be like our app should listen on the port we give it. So, and then if it is doing that, it'll just like tell us. So by the way, don't bother typing along. When we come back, I'll go over it again.
Okay.
So no, just say server running. Server running. So all I'm doing is that I've required Express. Now I'm calling Express, but I'm just setting it into an app so that I can use them multiple times so that I don't have to keep typing it. So I've saved Express in a variable. So I'm saying that app.get. So get is just a request method. We'll talk more about get, post, and all those things. So I'm saying that my app should, if I'm getting a request, and here's just like my route. If I'm getting a request, what I want to do is that I want to send hello world. And then I want to let my app listen on port 3000. So that's where my app will listen to see if we have any requests. So if I run this again, npm start, npm start, and if I go back to, where's it? If I go back to, I guess we did 3000. So
Mm,
if I go to port 3000, was it 3000? Let me check again.
2001. Oh,
I'm coming. Let me check. So you see, unable to connect, but I think it was. Let me check. It was 2000. Okay, the port was 2000. So if I go to port two, I mean 3000 is not because nothing is running there. So we're not running any server there. So I mean by default there'll be nothing going on there. So if we do 2000 now, hello world. So our server is running on port 2000 and it's sending hello world. So let's quickly take a break, 5 minutes break. When we come back, we'll we'll talk step by step about it. Yeah. Right now, let it be scattered in your brain. It's most likely confusing. When we come back, we'll just talk about it. So I'll see you in 5 minutes.
okay.
Yeah, hi, Emma.
Okay, I'm back.
Okay. Hey, wait, is my screen still sharing?
Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay.
Yes, my screen still sharing.
Yeah.
Okay, cool, cool, cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. How you feeling so far?
Um. Yeah. New stuff. So
Yeah.
it's processing.
Yeah, I mean the back end can be some way, but I guess when you get used to the back end, I mean I guess people think CSS is more difficult than the back end. So I guess when you get used to the back end is, and I guess one of the things I wanted to mention earlier was that, I mean, even though we use HTML, CSS, and JavaScript for the back end, for the front end, sorry, for the back end, I mean, there are so many other languages that you can use for the back end. So you have like PHP, you have like C Sharp, you have like Ruby, Python, Java. As long as they can all like spit out some HTML, they can like receive your code and do something with it. You can still use them for backend. So JavaScript is not like the only thing you can use for backend. So most of these other languages are like primarily backend languages. So but I guess when you understand fundamentally what is going on, you can pick another language for backend, like Java for backend and stuff like that. But JavaScript is also good for backend. So as
Mm,
long as you understand. But yeah, the I guess the very good thing about JavaScript is that you can use it for front end and you can use it for back end. That's why like people like it. So you don't have to use different languages for like front end and back end. So yeah. So
yeah.
just to go over what we're talking about, and hopefully we'll finish on time. Just to go over what we were talking about is we're talking about the server. So just to recap everything quickly. We're talking about the server. We said primarily our backend is comprised of three things. We have a server that is listening for requests. We have like some application running on the server. We have an application running on the server that is listening for these requests. And then we have a database that is like storing and organizing these things. Today, what we want to look at primarily is the server and the application that is running on the server. So if you look at what we had, and we said we can use Node to write the backend, and then Express is just like you want to call it like a framework that is built on top of Node, which is simplifying some of the things that if you are using raw Node, you have to do manually. Express is just like a framework, which is like abstracting all these things. So when we're looking at Node, and just to uncomment this thing out again, and I'll comment the Express one for now. Uh, so we're looking at how we can use Node to just build out a simple server. So we said we require the HTTP model. We require the create server method that comes with the HTTP model. And then based on that, we use that to handle our request. So based on the request, we send some kind of response. And then we said we have the write-head method that we can use. So I was just checking the docs when we were on the break. So I'll just put that up. Uh, so uh, it, and I guess most times if you want to see anything, you can easily go like to the docs and you'll find it. The docs are like the best place for like understanding what anything is doing. So like you can see, it says that to use the HTTP server and client, one must require the HTTP. What this does is that it creates like an interface in Node.js which supports many features. So if we want to use the HTTP server, we require it. So that's what we're doing. So the way you do it is you require HTTP. Now, when you require HTTP, the headers are just represented as objects, and now we're looking at the right head. So if I can find the right head, so what the right head does is that let's see. Okay, so what the right head does is that's how we are handling our response. So the right head, it takes, these are the various things it takes. First, it takes the status code, it takes a status message, and then you can pass in the header. You can pass in the header. So if you look at the code we were writing, first of all, it says it takes the status code. So we were checking if it is 200. So that is the status code. It also takes, where is this? It also takes the status message, then it takes the header. I mean, we didn't really have any status message, but we just had the header. So the header, we were just checking if it was the content type was text or plain. We didn't really need to check for a status message. So by default, that's what we are doing using like Node, where we are just like listening to the request that is coming on the server and doing something with it. Now we were saying that we could do the same thing with, and I'll save this code, I'll leave it. And I even put in the slide so we can look at it again. We said we can do a similar thing with Express, which is like a bit easier because then we don't have to check for the status code and things like that. So same way, if we want to use Express, we require Express. First, we have to install it because Express is not inbuilt into Node. It is an additional framework. So we do npm install Express. Then we can install Express. When we install Express, what we can do is that we can require it. When we require it, what we can then use Express to do is then we can use Express to create an application on our server that is listening and handling our request. If you look at when we're talking about what primarily our backend has, is that it has a server, it has an application on the server that is listening for requests. So we can use Express to build out the application that is listening for our request and our response. So when we require Express, we can then sort of use Express to build that application. So by default, if I console log Express, you can see all the things that is coming with Express. All these things, they are inbuilt and they contain like so many things that, because it's abstracted, you don't have to worry your head about like all those things. So if I stop my server and I run it again, hopefully it'll console log all the things in my Express. So if I console log Express and I guess I can pull this up a bit more. These are all the things that is coming just by me like requiring Express. These are all the things that comes with Express that I can use Express to handle. So if I want to handle any of these things, they are inbuilt into like Express that I can use Express to like handle them. So if I want to delete things, so all these things, but the reason you don't need to worry your head about them is that they are abstracted into it. So you just use them without like worrying what is going on very like low level, like how everything is being done. So Express is like handling all these things. So I know that I can easily build a server by just requiring Express. So so this is a way I can easily build out a server by requiring Express. And when I require Express, I can then use it to listen for requests on things like that. Now, the reason we're using get is that by default, there are different types of requests. So there's get, there's get, there's post, there's delete, sorry. And today we don't have to worry about all those. We'll get to that at a later date, and there's put. So by default, when you go to a website or when you go on any application and you are just loading up information, we'll say it's a get. So get is when you're just like loading up things that is already there. So if you go on like Instagram or if you go on like LinkedIn and you're loading up your feed, you say that is a get request because you're not like adding anything or you're not updating anything. You're just like loading up something that is already there. So that would be a get request. So get request is just like loading up things that is there. Now, a post request is when like you're creating something. So for example, if you go to a website and they ask you to like type in your maybe fill a form or like enter your username and things like that, will be a push request because then that is primarily like some sort of, you're sort of creating something or you're sort of doing something that will only take place on the backend. So get is just like loading up things. So it's not going to really do anything on the backend. It's just like loading up already existing data. Post is sort of creating new things. So when you're creating a username, when you're submitting things in a form, all those kind of requests are push requests. Delete is like when you're deleting
So
something.
like, let's say posting something, let's say on Instagram also, it will be
Consider,
a
it'll be a
post.
post. Yeah, it'll be a post. So the way whichever programmers will build Instagram is, it'll be a post. So by default, when you like sort of upload a picture, you are submitting a post request. What is then going to happen is that there's code on the backend which is going to handle it or save your post in a database or something. Then it will use get to load it up so that you can see or sort of refresh the page. So when you make that kind of request, that will be a post request. So use the post method. So the reason those methods are important is that depending on the request, then you know like this is a get request. So I use a get method to sort of respond to this request. This is a post request. So I use a post method. So all these methods are different things. Now delete is like, so you have a method called delete. If you are deleting something, use the delete method to handle that request. And put is just if you want to update something, use the put request. I mean, there are so many other like HTTP request methods, but these are primarily the most used ones. So just get something that is existing, post, create new things, delete. So I mean, if you're getting started with the backend, there's what we call CRUD application, which will teach you like how to implement all these things. So create, which will be your which will be your post, read, which will be your get, update, which will be your put, and delete. But don't worry about that for today. But the only reason I brought that up is you can see by default, I was using a get. So get means that we're just loading up something that already exists. And by default, whenever you go on a website, if you don't add anything, after the /, you are by default going to the home page. So we're saying that if the person comes on our application and it's just the root route, the home page, what we want to do is we want to send them hello world. So if we had an actual application, if we had a front end built, we could say that when they come on our application, load up the home page. So if it's just the root route, load up the home page. So for example, if I go on, let's see, what website do I not go on at all? Can you give me like an example of a website where they require to log in? Okay.
Well, Facebook.
Let me see. Let me just open incognito and just open like any website. So for example, if you go on Facebook, I guess just Facebook, it's facebook.com. If you go on facebook.com, am I spelling it right? If you go on facebook.com and hopefully, oh Lord, where's my phone? They'll be like, I don't come. What am I doing here today? Okay, Facebook doesn't want to load. Yeah, I mean, I don't mind if we don't get you everything, but as long as like you understand like these ones, I mean, we can always build. Let me try it again. Why is Facebook not loading?
Yeah.
Okay, so by default, when you go on Facebook, you see that it brings you here. Now let's see something. It brings you to the home page. Now, if I try to, for example, go to, I think maybe if you are logged in, let me see. I think I logged into my Facebook recently because I had to do something. So I'm already logged in. So Facebook. Now I just want to show you something. Okay, for some reason, Facebook doesn't like me. Okay, there we go. So it's loading. So why is it taking so long?
Because of the Zoom.
Which is weird.
Maybe.
Hopefully it will load eventually. Don't worry, we have time for Facebook. Okay, so you see when I load, hey, is it my birthday? when I load Facebook, by default, you see, because I was already logged in, it logged me inside. It logged me inside directly. Now, what is happening is that when you go onto a website, first of all, it'll check if you're already logged in, then it'll just log you. It'll just redirect it. So if we go into our headers, so if I go into my network tab, if I go into my network tab, you can see that Let me make this bigger. If I go into my network tab, you can see that most of the requests, first of all, you can see that it has like a post request. So the post request is probably checking if I'm already logged in. If I'm already logged in, then it says 200. So you can see like the status code. So, oh, sorry, I'm trying to make it bigger. I know all these things are things that happens like every day, but I mean, if you're not like programming and stuff like that, you probably never know that all these things are going on in your browser. So you can see that if I come here, like there's a number of like post requests and things that are happening. And it's just like this is just like because I'm already logged in. So it's like sort of redirecting me and just like getting my content. Now, if I go into the same Facebook that I opened in my incognito, where's did I okay. If I go into the same Facebook and we check the network request, we'll see that the kind of request that we are getting is slightly like different from all the ones we got when we were a programmer was having fun. Where's my network tab? So you can see that, but I am
Mhm.
oh, okay.
Yeah,
I think Facebook was killing my bandwidth for some weird reason,
oh, sorry.
which is strange. Yeah, so I mean, I just wanted to show you those things. I mean, the more you do these things, the more it'll eventually start to make sense. So, can you see my screen, please?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So, in the same line, what we are doing is we're simply building out our server. We're requiring Express. We're going to use Express to build out our server. Then we're just like calling Express. So here we've required it. If we require it, it doesn't mean we are using it. We've just saying that now we've imported it into our application. To actually use it, it's like when you write a function, until you call the function, you're not actually using it. So we've required the Express here. Now we want to use it. So we are just like calling it. But just so that I don't want to keep typing Express, or I don't want to keep typing Express with parentheses. I'm just storing it in an application so that I can like use it over and over. So here I'm saying app.get. So if it's just a get request and it is on the root route, what I want to do is that I want to send hello world. So for example, I could also say if it is a get request and it is on the login page, do welcome. Or maybe let me just leave this one. Let me leave it how it is. Let me just copy the same thing. Copy the same thing, paste, and just say that if it is a get request, then it is on the login page. What we want to do is that maybe we want to do please login. Yeah, I mean, if only this makes sense today, it'll be fine with me. I'll be happy. We can always get into the so if we go back into here, let's go to, I think we're doing on localhost. So we're using our computer as our server. That's why we are able to run our server. So if we come to localhost 2000, it says hello world. So it's a get request on the root route. If we make the same get request on the login, we cannot get login. So this is not a get request. Let me see, did I save? So this is not a get request. Let me see. Let me see if it's a post request. Wait, let me see what is wrong first, and I explain what is happening. Security policy. The page setting is blocked. Okay, fair. I guess it's just core stuff. Yeah, so it's just core stuff. I have to install course, but not to get too deep. So by the way, this is just like how we'll build out a simple server using Express. First of all, it's good to know how you would using Node, so you create the server. But this is just the same way you would build the same thing using Express. And you can look at it and let me know if you have any questions. Then we can maybe go one level deeper and we can wrap up for today. Please ask all your questions or feel free if you don't understand anything.
Just checking. Oh, I think so far, so yeah, it's clear. It's clearer now.
Okay. So for example, let's say
Oh wait, sorry. I had a question about the docs. That you just Googled, or how did you get it?
can you ask again which one?
The docs.
Yeah. You just Google, like just look up
Okay.
what you're trying to like everything they write like documentations for it. Because I mean, if you create something and you don't explain it to us, how would we the users know? So usually every like when there's a framework or any software, they write like a documentation for it of like what these things are, like what these things are doing. Because when they are writing it, when they are building it, they use some certain names and stuff like until you explain it to like the developers won't know like what you meant for like create server to do. I mean, it looks self-explanatory, but you have to tell me that create server is creating a server. So when you go, most of them have documentation. Some of them are not good documentations down there. Some of them are just like very like wordy and you won't even understand. Like you read it and you'll be more confused. But most times, like they have like good documentation that you read and like know what things are supposed to do. Yeah. So let's say we're running this on our I guess on our port 2000. So by default, this is how we are creating the server, and we are listening. Right today, we're just doing get request. We are not like creating anything. We don't have a form, so we're just like get request, just reading stuff. So get is just to read stuff, and we are reading stuff on the port. So let's say we had a note. So there's this note here. Let me just copy it. Let's say we had a note. And I'll paste it and we can just, so let's say we have a node. So it's just an array of objects. So we have nodes with an ID 1, 2, 3, and it just has some content. So it's you can just take a few minutes to look at it, but it's just like I'm just saving some notes in an array. Then I want to load it up if a user went on a particular part of the application. So let's say we had this note and we want to load this note when like the user went on a particular route. So for example, if they went on a route called like API.note, so it's just the same way. We already have our server. We built out our server with Express and we've saved it in a variable called app so we can listen. So we can listen we can do app.get. So we're saying that if it is a get request, then maybe we can give it any route. So let's say if they go on a route called app API.note, then what we want to do is that we want to process their request. So you cannot, I mean, I'll just use short form, but it's just request and response. So, and then we want to maybe send them the note. So let's say rest.json. Then we want to send a note. So again, all this is saying is that if the user went on a route, which is /API/note, and it is a get request. So get request means that they are loading something. They are not sending any kind of, they are not like creating anything. They're just like trying to read something. We'll send them, and it's this route, we'll send them this rest.json, which is the note. So we just make this note a JSON and send it. And by the way, if you didn't understand this part, let me just move it down. So usually when you're building on your local machine, since I'm building locally, I'm using like my computer as my server. I have to specify where the server should run. So that's why I give it like a port. So I'm saying that I want to set a port of like 2000. So I want to run it on a port called 2000. So then I'm saying that my app should listen for port 2000. So that's where all the requests I want to run on this server are running. Usually when you deploy your app on like a cloud or something, they'll have their own ports that it will run on. But if you are doing it locally, you have to like specify, since right now your computer is your server, you have to specify where the application should run. So that's why I give it a port. I mean, you don't have to like give it, set it into a variable. You could maybe come here and just like directly write 2000. So set it directly 2000. But I mean, I like to set it like this because then it's easy to change it. So if I wanted to change it, I could just come here and change the port and stuff like that. So now we're just attempting to listen for more requests on the server. So now we're just creating a new endpoint. So if the user goes to /API/note, what we want to do is we want to send them this note. So let's see if that should work. If we go, it's the thing even, oh, I know why the other one didn't work. So by default, I just read the error and I saw by default, when you're using Node, every time you make a change, you have to restart the server. I mean, later on, there's a way that you can get your server to restart itself. So, but now, since we are just using like raw Node, every time we make a change, for the change to reflect, we have to like stop the server. So if you do Control-C or stop the server, then you have to run it again. So if I comment this out and I do the thing that wasn't working, when we said app.listen. So if they went to app.get, if they made a get request to the route called log in, what we want to do is we want to process their request to a request and response. And we want to maybe tell them that they should log into rest.send. Please log in. Most times you won't be sending like just things like this. You have like a front-end application with like different parts. So maybe, for example, if they do that and you wanted to send them like index. So let's say I had an index.html. So let me just create. I mean, most times you do it better, but let me just show you how you do your index.html. And so you have different parts of the front end that's based on the request that is coming on the back end. You send them to that particular page. So this is like maybe home page. H1. Welcome home. So I'm coming. So by the way, are you typing along? Am I going too fast?
Yeah, it's a bit fast. So I'll try to practice it afterwards. Like, I mean, I'm not working this week some days, so I'm just trying to follow to understand so that I
Yeah.
can practice.
Yeah. Okay. So we could send. So for example, if where's this one? So we could, if we wanted to, usually you won't just be like sending them like one text. Usually you'll be sending them to like a part of the application. So let's say we want to send them to the homepage, and let's say our homepage will be index.html just for demonstration purposes. So we could send file, and the file is index.html. So we're not, our file is not HTML. So we're saying that if they go on the login page, if they go on the login route, where we want to send them is that we want to send them to the index.html. So if we restart our server, if we restart our server, I'm coming, let me see, npm start. Okay, server is running. So if we send, so first of all, if we go to this one, hello world, because we said if it is on the root route, we want to take them to hello world. If it is on the login, okay, I have to specify the path. uh, I have to specify the path. So, and don't worry. I mean, I just wanted to show you when we get to actually doing files. I mean, we'll take, but I just wanted to show you how, like in an application, you would send them to a different page based on like what they are doing. So, Danny, can I see Danny? Okay, yeah, it's called index.html.
Mm.
Okay, so if I restart, and I guess you can already see that restarting your server all the time is tiring. So next time we'll learn how to like let our server restart itself. But I guess if the first time you have to like know that every time you have to restart your server. So I hope my file path is correct. Path is not defined. Oh, sorry, I didn't require path. Yeah, these are some of the things that you go through and like things will be working. You'll be like, oh, I didn't do this thing. So but I have to require the path. It's equal to require path. Okay, so now I can restart my server and save. Let me just clear it first of all. I can't even see. Okay, so I mean that's why I don't want to get into into the files and stuff like. But so I mean we'll talk about paths and stuff like that. So like I'll set a path. So I'm saying that when the user goes to like a login page, the login route, I'll send them to here. So most times your front end, you have like which part of your front end you are sending them based on like your request. So if they are not logged in, by default, the way you program applications, if you are not logged in, we'll send you to this page. If you're already logged in, we'll already load your profile and stuff like that. So all those things is like taking place on your backend, but not to worry about this. I guess you can worry about this since we've already gotten into part. But I guess the other thing I just wanted to show was that you can send other things. So right now we've seen how you can send like a page. So I can send you to a part of my front end based on like what route you are going on. So for example, if you also go on this route, I can just send you some notes. So if you go on and if you go on, I think it's called API/note. API/note. Okay, I have to restart myself. I hate this thing so much. Okay, let me just show you. So if you don't want to restart your server all the time, it's already getting me tired. So there's a package called NodeMon. So if you install, you just do npm install dash dash def. I guess dash dash def. If you install NodeMon is just like a, a package that allows you it will automatically restart your server every time. So sorry, save dash dev. So if you save it, the way I'm saving it is I'm only saving it in this project. I don't want to like save it on my computer. I just want to save it like for this project. So it's not like a global package, it's just for this. So if I do NodeMon, I can then use NodeMon to like restart my server automatically so that I don't have to keep restarting. Yeah, my server. But I mean, the reason I was doing it like that so that you know how to start your server, because you don't want to build a server and you don't know how to start your server because you are used to letting NodeMon start your server. So now all I can do is that I can just change this. So you can see that now I have a dev dependency. So a dev dependency means that there are dependencies that you just use when you're developing. So this dependency, my project is dependent on it. So anywhere I put my project, if I host it on like a cloud or like a hosting service, it'll still need this one. But dev dependency just means that I only need it when I'm building the application. So when I'm only developing the application, that's when I need it. So if you want a dev dependency, use like --save --dev. But we'll talk about this some other time. Yeah, so now I have NodeMon installed, so I can just change this thing to NodeMon. And we have 9 more minutes. Don't worry, we'll finish soon. I can just change this thing to NodeMon. So if I change this thing to NodeMon, I'm saying that every time I run it, I want to use NodeMon to run the application, because with Node, I have to manually restart it every time. Yeah, so NodeMon will just like automatically restart it every time I make changes. So yeah, so when I go to api.notes, like I get the notes because I specify that if the person goes on this particular route, what I want to do is that I want to send them like this notes as JSON. So if a lot of things was confusing right today, just to like summarize, we are learning that to build a backend, most times we need 3 things. We need like a server, we need like an application running on the server, which is listening for requests, and we need a database. We've not done anything about database so far, so don't worry. So what primarily we've looked at is we've looked at, first of all, how to initialize. If we want to build the backend, what we have to do is, first of all, we need to initialize the backend, or we need to initialize the project. We use npm init, and we said npm is a package manager that allows us to like install things. So you can see, like when I wanted to install NodeMon is something that is a package that is somebody built, but somebody found out that starting your node server every time is tiring, so somebody decided to build NodeMon so that it will automatically restart your server every time you make changes. So when somebody builds something like that, it becomes like the way you have applications in the App Store. So I can go into the App Store using npm and I can install it. So now I install npm NodeMon. Now I have NodeMon part of my Node project, and I can use NodeMon to restart my server. For example, when we spoke about Express, you said Express is not like inbuilt into Node. So the way somebody saw that when you're building a server and you have to like manually check for like the status, all those things is tiring. Somebody was like, I can abstract it and make it easy so that you don't have to like create the server manually. But then I can abstract it and make it easy for you to create a server. So they did it, and they built Express and they put it in the Node package manager. So now if I want to use Express, I can just do npm install Express and I install it and I have it in my application and I can use it. So that's what like npm does. So we said if we want to initialize a project, we use npm init. When we do npm init, that sort of becomes like the ID into our project, and it creates a package.json which is like the ID for our project, and we can use that to sort of enter our project and things like that. And we said the script part is where we can write things that we want to use to run our project. So here I just use like a start. So I'm saying that every time I type npm start, what I want to do is I want to run this command, which is NodeMon index.js. So NodeMon is just, previously we did it as node index.js, which was using Node to start our server, but now I'm using NodeMon because NodeMon just is listening for my server. So every time I make a change, it will run it. But just the way you see that we do a script and it is running it. So that's the advantage of like writing a script so that you can use it to consistently run things. Now we said I guess the main part you have to always remember in this part, in the package.json, is the entry point. So how you are going to enter your application. So based on here, we wrote all the main things for our backend in this index.js. So we said the entry point of our application is going to be index.js. If you called it something else, you just have to change it to match the name of what you called it so that you can easily run your application. So did the package.json part make sense? Hi, Emma, can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah. Okay. Did the package.json part make sense? I'm wrapping up. 5 minutes, we're gone.
Yeah, Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. Yeah. Then then we started looking at how to build the server actually. We said there are two ways. I mean, the main way is to use Node, but the Node is cumbersome, but it's still good to know like how to build it with Node. So I'll leave the code if you want to look at how to build it with Node. I'll just copy the link. I'll find the link to the docs and send it to you. But we also said we could do the same thing using Express. So if we want to build a server using Express, it's pretty much easy. And I guess the way you most likely do it is you use Express rather than using like raw Node. So we require Express because we've installed it. And I was just using this path because I had to link my this path. For now, you don't need that. So let me just get rid of it. So I can just simply use Express to build out my server.
Okay.
And when I run it, I'll run a server, but just so I don't want to keep typing Express, I just save it into an app. So just by doing this, I built out a server and I can just start writing out how I want my server to run. So first of all, I want to, if my user goes on the home route, what I want to do is I want to send them hello world. If they go on this route, what I want to do is I want to send them here and here and here. So I guess that's the main part. And the final part, usually you just have to listen. So you have to set a port. If you are developing, you have to set a port so that you can test it out. So you set a port, then you listen on that port. So when you listen on that port, this thing is not necessary, but just so that I know that my application is actually running. That's why I console log up running. Any questions? Then we're gone.
No.
I know you're probably tired and it's like
It's
so
fine.
much. So, but yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, but I'll go over it.
Yeah,
I'll go over it.
yeah, that's fine. That's fine. Yeah, but I mean, if you have any questions, the beginning of backend is like very confusing, even for me. Like, it was very confusing. So, no pressure if you don't understand anything. Just read the docs, ask me, ask ChatGPT, and just practice, build. I mean, it shouldn't be hard to go over this. And this is just how to build a simple server. It'll get more complicated because then now you have to, if you have a big application, you have like so many routes you have to listen for. So then, but if you understand this, that's like good enough. So
Yeah.
I'll stop recording now.